Introduction. This book is a journey into the inner world of the INFP personality type, a world filled with rich emotions, complex thoughts, vivid imaginations, and burning questions about identity, truth, and purpose. If you're an INFP, you may have spent your life feeling slightly out of step with the world around you. Maybe you've been called too sensitive, too quiet, or too idealistic. Maybe you've wrestled with the weight of emotions you can't quite explain, or felt torn between your dreams and the demands of daily life. Maybe you've longed for connection, but struggled to find people who truly see you. If so, this book is for you. The INFP personality, often labeled the mediator or the healer, is one of the rarest of the 16 Myers-Briggs types. It is a type defined not by loudness or dominance, but by depth of feeling, of thought, of spirit. INFPs are led by a strong inner compass, one guided by deeply held personal values and an unwavering belief in the possibility of a better, more authentic world. But they are also complex and paradoxical. They can be soft yet unshakable, gentle yet fierce in their convictions, introverted yet wildly imaginative. Their complexity makes them beautiful and often misunderstood. Understanding the INFP is not something that can be done in a surface-level glance. This personality cannot be summarized in a single paragraph or reduced to a list of traits. To truly understand the INFP, you must be willing to enter a layered, often contradictory, deeply emotional landscape. You must be willing to move slowly, to listen carefully, and to respect the sacred privacy that defines so much of who they are. And once you do, you begin to see that their quietness is not emptiness. It's a kind of fullness that needs space to breathe. This book is for those who carry big dreams and quiet fears. It is for those who live in their heads and their hearts, often caught in between. It is for the ones who write stories they never show, who cry when others don't understand why, who believe in goodness even when the world gives them reasons not to. It is for those who feel deeply, love carefully, and need to be reminded that their softness is not weakness. It is their strength. More than anything, this book is a celebration of the INFP spirit. In a world that often praises speed, certainty, and surface success, the INFP walks a different path, one of authenticity, reflection, and quiet courage. Chapter 1. Who is the INFP? The INFP personality is made up of 4 core preferences: introversion, intuition, feeling, and perceiving. But let's not get too technical just yet. What does that actually mean? It means that if you're an INFP, you likely feel things on a level that's hard to explain. You think in metaphors, you notice what others miss, and you're constantly tuned into meaning. Not just the meaning of words, but the meaning behind experiences, gestures, glances, silences. You're the kind of person who can walk into a room and sense the mood before a single word is spoken. You pick up on undercurrents, on energy, on what's not being said. And even though you may not always have the words right away, your emotional radar is rarely wrong. You're probably also someone who spends a lot of time in your inner world. That world is where your imagination lives. Vivid, colorful, full of characters, possibilities, and alternate endings to conversations you had 3 days ago. You may find yourself replaying memories, rewriting them, dreaming up what could be, what should be, what might never be. And yet somehow, you still feel it as if it's real. And in many ways, for an INFP, it is real. The internal world doesn't feel like fantasy. It feels like home. It's where your values live, your hopes hide, and your best ideas are born. But there's also this paradox that comes with being an INFP. You may feel like you're both incredibly sensitive and incredibly strong. You can be moved to tears by a song, a memory, or a stranger's pain, and yet stand firmly, almost stubbornly, for what you believe is right, even if no one else agrees with you. There's a quiet fire inside you that people don't always see right away. On the outside, you might come across as shy or gentle, but inside, you are intense about your values, about love, about justice, about truth. That internal intensity is largely driven by your dominant function, introverted feeling. This is what gives INFPs their powerful internal value system. You're not someone who follows the crowd. In fact, crowds often make you want to retreat. You don't make decisions based on trends, logic alone, or external approval. You make them based on how things feel to your core. If something doesn't sit right with your values, even if it makes perfect sense on paper, you just can't do it. You may not always be able to explain why, but you know when something violates your truth. And for you, integrity isn't just a virtue, it's a requirement. Then there's your secondary function, extrovert intuition, which is the magic maker. This is where all your ideas come from. The ability to connect seemingly unrelated things, to see patterns, to imagine not just what is, but what could be. This is why you can spend hours thinking about the possibilities of a single idea. It's why you often come alive in conversation with someone who's just as open-minded and curious as you are. Your brain doesn't just think, it wanders. It leaps, it loops, it flies into the future and back to the past. You're a thinker and a feeler, all at once, which can be beautiful and exhausting. You've probably noticed that people often don't quite get you. That's because the INFP personality is rare, and its gifts are often subtle. You're not someone who demands attention. You don't walk into a room trying to impress. In fact, you often prefer not to be noticed at all, at least not right away. You want to be understood, not just seen. And unfortunately, we live in a world that often rewards loudness over depth. So you might have grown up feeling like you were too quiet, too sensitive, or too lost in your head. But the truth is, you were just living in a different frequency, one that isn't always visible on the surface. That's part of what makes being an INFP both a gift and a challenge. You're often aware of your uniqueness, but you don't always know what to do with it. You may struggle with feeling out of place, even among people you care about. You might find it hard to explain your thoughts because they come with such depth and complexity that words sometimes fail you. And that's okay. You weren't made to be like everyone else. You were made to offer something different, a perspective rooted in empathy, in imagination, in quiet truth. You're the kind of person who can change someone's life without even realizing it. A kind word from you can echo for years. A story you write, a song you share, a moment of listening. These things ripple out in ways you may never see. You don't just make people feel understood. You make them feel safe to be themselves. That's rare. That's sacred. That's the power of the INFP soul. So who's the INFP? The INFP is a walking paradox. A dreamer with both fire and fragility. A lover of truth who also longs for beauty. A soft heart with a spine of steel. You are someone who lives deeply, feels deeply, and often aches for a world more aligned with the goodness you carry inside. You are not weak for feeling so much. You are not strange for caring so fiercely. You are not lost, even when the world tells you that your dreams are unrealistic. You are an INFP, and you are exactly who you're meant to be. Being an INFP often means existing in a world that feels too loud, too fast, too sharp. It means walking through life with open eyes and an even more open heart, absorbing beauty and pain in equal measure. You notice things that others overlook, the sadness behind someone's smile, the quiet tension in a room, the poetry in a moment most would dismiss as ordinary. You have an uncanny ability to tune into the emotional undertones of life, to sense the meaning behind the mundane, and to feel deeply even when nothing is being said out loud. This deep sensitivity is both your superpower and your weight to carry. Because while it allows you to connect with people on a soul level, it also means you feel things intensely, sometimes more intensely than you'd like. Joy can be overwhelming. Sadness can be paralyzing. Rejection doesn't just sting, it echoes. And when the world doesn't seem to reflect the beauty or kindness you believe in, it can feel like a personal wound. That's why you may often retreat. Not because you're weak or antisocial, but because you need time alone to process, to recharge, to make sense of everything you've taken in. The inner world of an INFP is a sanctuary. It's where your creativity lives, often bursting in ways that feel sacred and uncontainable. Whether it's writing, music, drawing, photography, or simply imagining new world in your mind, creative expression is often your first language. When words fail, your art speaks. It's not about fame or recognition. It's about putting form to what you feel, giving life to the invisible currents inside you. That's why you might feel empty or unsettled when you go too long without creating something. For you, creativity isn't a hobby. It's a lifeline. But for all your depth and imagination, life in the real world can sometimes feel disorienting. You may struggle with the day-to-day demands of systems that feel rigid, fast-paced, or impersonal. Deadlines, bureaucracy, small talk, and surface-level interactions can be draining. You may find yourself questioning your path more often than others, wondering whether what you're doing truly aligns with your inner values. You may worry that you're falling behind, that others are achieving more, moving faster, figuring life out while you're still lost in your thoughts. But here's what you need to know. Your timing is not broken. You're not behind. You're just moving at the speed of depth, and depth takes time. You were never meant to rush through life. You were meant to feel your way through it. You were meant to pause and reflect, to connect and create, to sit with questions longer than most would be comfortable. This doesn't make you slow. It makes you thoughtful. It makes you human in a world that often forgets how to be. And when you do step into action, when your values and vision finally align, you are a quiet force to be reckoned with. You don't push for attention. You simply show up with authenticity, and people feel it. They may not always understand you, but they feel your presence. And in that feeling, something shifts. It's also important to acknowledge that being an INFP can sometimes be lonely. Because you live so much of your life internally, you may struggle to articulate what's going on inside. You may long for deep, soul-level connection, but find it hard to meet people who match your depth or honor your sensitivity. You may give so much of yourself in relationships and feel unseen in return. That's a particular kind of ache, to be full of love and truth with nowhere to pour it. But know this, the right people will come. People who see you, not just your silence or your kindness, but the fire underneath it. And when those people come, the connection will be electric, healing, real. You are not made to fit in. You were made to stand apart, to bring softness into hard places, to offer stories where there's silence, to challenge injustice not with noise, but with conviction, to show that gentleness is not weakness, that quiet is not emptiness, and that inner values can be louder than outer ambition. You are here to remind the world what it means to live with soul. Chapter 2. The Inner World, where fantasy, feeling, and fire meet. If there's one place an INFP knows better than any map can ever chart, it's their own inner world. That's where everything begins, not out there, but in here. While most people interact with the world primarily through what they see and hear, INFPs experience life first through what they feel. The outer world is secondary. The inner world is the real terrain. And this inner terrain, it's vast, vibrant, and layered. It's like a garden, a cathedral, and a storm all at once. To understand an INFP, you have to understand this. Their most meaningful conversations happen in silence. Their greatest adventures often unfold behind their eyes. Their decisions, their values, their desires, they're all filtered through this rich, ever-shifting inner landscape. It's a place fueled by emotion, lit by imagination, and guarded fiercely by personal truth. It's why they may take longer to respond in a conversation. They're not being evasive. They're just sifting through layers of thoughts and feelings, checking in with their inner compass before they speak. You might think this would make them detached from the world, but that's not the case at all. INFPs are deeply connected, just not always in ways that are visible. They're picking up on emotional tones, underlying meaning, subtleties most people miss. A small gesture might mean more to them than an entire speech. A quiet sunset could move them to tears while others simply scroll past. Their emotional world doesn't operate on volume. It operates on depth. Because of this sensitivity, INFPs often carry a longing that's hard to name. It's not just a desire to be happy or successful. It's something more elusive, the desire for wholeness, for something to feel right. They're constantly evaluating whether the life they're living matches what's true inside. When it does, they can feel peaceful, creative, even radiant. When it doesn't, the disconnect can feel like grief, like living out of tune with their own soul. This is why authenticity is everything to them. They can't fake it for long. They can't force themselves into roles or environments that contradict their values, even if those things come with prestige or approval. There's also something sacred about the way INFPs dream. Their imagination isn't just whimsical, it's a portal. A place where ideas are born, where emotions transform into art, where they try on different futures and explore endless possibilities. Daydreaming isn't a distraction for them. It's a form of navigation. It's how they process, how they soothe, how they hope. And it's also where they go when the world feels too harsh, too loud, or too indifferent. This inner fantasy world isn't about escaping reality. It's about reshaping it from the inside out. INFPs are natural visionaries, not because they want to dominate or control, but because they want things to be better, kinder, more beautiful, more fair. They imagine what could be, and then they carry that vision quietly, waiting for the right moment, the right expression, the right path to give it form. Sometimes they write it down. Sometimes they paint it. Sometimes they just hold it, gently, until the time feels right. But this deep connection to the inner world can also come with its challenges. It's easy to get lost in thought, to spiral into overthinking, to stay so long in a dream that reality starts to feel distant. That's the INFP paradox. Having such a rich internal life that the outside world sometimes feels like a secondary stage. It's a constant dance. How much time do you spend in the heart's quiet chambers? And how much do you venture into the world to act on what you've discovered there? Because here's the thing. Even though the inner world is so fulfilling, INFPs do want to be seen. They want to be known. They want their thoughts and dreams and values to matter in the world around them. But they often struggle to bridge that gap. It can be hard to take what's so beautiful inside and find a way to express it, not because they lack creativity, but because their inner experiences feel sacred, almost too precious to expose to the cold air of judgment or misunderstanding. That's why trust is everything. INFPs open up slowly, like a flower that needs the right amount of sunlight and patience. When they do open up, they offer something real, not rehearsed, not filtered, not hollow. But they need space. They need time. They need to know they won't be ridiculed for their tenderness, their depth, their questions. The inner world is a garden of rare things. It's not meant to be trampled by people who only value the obvious or the loud. When an INFP feels safe, when someone sees past the quiet and into the flame, that's when everything changes. That's when their imagination comes alive in the real world. That's when their compassion begins to ripple outward. That's when they start building bridges between what they feel and what they create. And in that state, INFPs can be extraordinary. They can lead, heal, teach, write, paint, advocate, not by mimicking others, but by being fully themselves. The magic of the INFP lies in that strange, beautiful balance between softness and strength, imagination and action, retreat and return. Their inner world is not a hiding place. It's a source, a wellspring, a compass. And once they learn how to trust it without becoming trapped in it, they become a force of quiet, grounded power. So if you're an INFP reading this, know that your inner world is not something to fix. It's something to honor. It is your greatest gift. Yes, it may take longer to find your place. Yes, you may feel misunderstood. Yes, the outer world may not always reflect what you hold sacred inside. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means your journey looks different. It's slower. It's deeper. It's real. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the world doesn't need more speed. Maybe it needs more soul, more dreamers who feel, more quiet creators who hold on to what's beautiful, even when it's hard. More INFPs, just like you, who carry light in places no one else even thought to look. What makes the inner world of an INFP so different, so captivating, yet so difficult to explain, is the way everything feels alive in there. Thoughts don't just come and go. They echo. Emotions aren't just passing moods. They take root and grow into stories, meaning, sometimes even entire worlds. An offhand comment from someone might be forgotten in seconds by others. But for an INFP, it might replay quietly for days, digging beneath the surface to ask, why did that hurt? What did it really mean? What does it say about me or about them? That's the kind of mental processing happening behind the soft eyes, the calm voice, and the polite smile. It's not overthinking in the traditional sense. It's more like emotional archaeology. You're digging for layers, brushing away the dust, trying to get to the core of what's really going on. You're trying to understand everything, not just what happened, but how it felt, what it symbolized, what it means for the future. You don't just remember experiences, you carry them. And they become a part of how you move through the world. This is why INFPs can appear quiet on the outside, but are constantly processing inside. They may not always respond immediately in conversation, not because they're disengaged, but because they want their response to come from a place of truth. They want to mean what they say. Surface-level talk can feel exhausting because it requires energy without offering depth. But when you ask an INFP about something that matters to them, when the conversation touches values, stories, dreams, you'll see them light up. Their eyes sparkle, their voice softens or grows more passionate, and suddenly you're no longer talking to someone shy or withdrawn. You're talking to someone present, alive, and fully engaged. That's because the inner world isn't isolated from their outer life. It shapes it. Everything an INFP does is filtered through that inner emotional and ethical lens. Every decision, every creative act, every boundary set or relationship nurtured, it's all guided by the quiet question, does this feel right? And not just in a fleeting emotional sense, but in a soul-deep, value-aligned way. If something conflicts with their core beliefs, no amount of external reward can make it worth it. That's why you'll often see INFPs walk away from things that look good on paper, jobs, friendships, even opportunities, if they don't feel authentic. It's not because they're being dramatic. It's because inauthenticity drains them like nothing else. This deep connection to values and feelings can make them incredibly principled people. They may not always speak up loudly, but they stand firm on what they believe in. They are rarely swayed by trends or peer pressure. Their inner moral compass is strong and steady, even if they don't always voice it. But when the moment is right, when they feel it matters, they will speak. And when they do, it comes from a place of clarity and conviction that commands attention, not because it's loud, but because it's true. Of course, living so much in the inner world isn't always easy. Sometimes it can feel like you're living in two realities, the one inside you and the one outside you. And those two don't always match. You might look around and feel like no one else seems to care about the things that move you. You might feel lonely in a crowd, even when you're technically connected. That's one of the heaviest parts of being an INFP. The experience of being emotionally awake in a world that often seems asleep. And yet, it's also what makes you such a powerful presence. Because when people are around you, they can sense the difference. They may not always know how to describe it, but they feel it. You see them in a way others don't. You hear the words between their words. You offer compassion that isn't performative, it's rooted in empathy. And in doing so, you give people permission to be real, too. So often, INFPs ask themselves, what's wrong with me? Why do I care so much? Why do I feel everything so deeply? Why do I struggle to just be normal? But here's the truth. There is nothing wrong with you. You're just tuned into things others are often too distracted to notice. You were made to feel. You were designed to reflect, to imagine, to create beauty out of confusion, connection out of chaos, meaning out of the mundane. That's your gift. It's not always easy to carry, but it's needed in this world more than ever. Your inner world, with all its questions, emotions, dreams, and longings, is not a flaw to fix. It is a source. It's where your best ideas are born. It's where your most honest self lives. It's where healing begins, for you and for those you choose to open it up to. So protect it, explore it, trust it, let it guide your actions, your art, your relationships, and your path. Chapter 3, Connection and Solitude. Navigating relationships. One of the most beautiful and complicated things about being an INFP is the way you navigate relationships. You crave connection. Deep, soulful, meaningful connection. Not the casual surface-level kind that comes and goes, but the type that feels rare, sacred, and emotionally real. You want to know people, truly know them, and be known in return. Not just the facts of who they are, but their dreams, their pain, their essence. You want to understand someone's heart, and you want them to take the time to understand yours. But the irony is that, even with this longing for closeness, you also need a lot of space. You cherish your solitude. You find comfort in being alone, not because you dislike people, but because being around others, even people you love, can be energetically overwhelming. You absorb emotions like a sponge. You feel responsible for the emotional tone of every room. And sometimes, just the act of being present with others requires you to wear a kind of emotional armor, one that protects your inner world from being too exposed, too vulnerable, too easily misunderstood. This creates a push and pull rhythm in many INFPs. You want to be close, but not too close. You want to share, but only when it feels safe. You want to be held, but also left alone. And that can be confusing, both to the people in your life and to yourself. You might find yourself pulling away from people you care about without knowing exactly why. Sometimes it's because your energy is drained. Other times it's because you've been hurt, even subtly, and you're retreating to heal in silence. And often, it's just because you need time to process all the emotions that have built up like waves on a quiet shore. When you do form relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or otherwise, you give deeply. You love with your whole heart, even if that love doesn't always show up in loud or traditional ways. You remember the little things people say. You write long, thoughtful messages. You think about someone long after the conversation has ended. You invest emotionally, not because you expect anything in return, but because it's in your nature to care deeply. And when someone enters your heart, they don't just occupy a room. They become part of your inner story. They stay with you, sometimes for years, even if they're no longer in your life. But that depth of feeling comes with risk. When you're hurt in relationships, when someone breaks your trust, dismisses your feelings, or fails to see you, it cuts deep. You may not lash out. You may not confront them with anger. But inside, it's like a quiet heartbreak. And instead of retaliating, your instinct is usually to retreat, to disappear, to grieve alone. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of INFPs, their tendency to vanish. It's not because they don't care. It's because they care too much, and they need to retreat to protect their emotional ecosystem from further damage. You may have noticed that you're very selective with your inner circle. You might have many acquaintances, but very few people who you let all the way in. That's because for you, emotional safety isn't optional. It's essential. You don't open up just because someone asks. You open up when you feel that the space is right, that it's genuine, that it won't be used against you later. And once someone earns your trust, you become fiercely loyal. You stand by them. You believe in them, sometimes even more than they believe in themselves. You hold space for them when they're breaking, and you see potential in them even when the world has given up. But you also need to be careful. That same compassion that makes you such a beautiful friend or partner can also leave you vulnerable to emotional exhaustion. You may find yourself giving too much, tolerating too much, or trying to fix people who aren't willing to fix themselves. You might stay in unhealthy dynamics longer than you should, hoping that your presence will be enough to help someone change. And while your heart is noble, you have to remember, it's not your job to carry someone else's healing on your back. Loving someone deeply does not mean sacrificing your well-being. You can hold space without losing yourself. You also need people who pour into you, not just emotionally, but energetically. People who honor your complexity, who don't rush your process, who understand that when you're quiet, it doesn't mean you're angry. That when you disappear, it doesn't mean you've stopped caring. That when you say, I need space, it doesn't mean you're pushing them away forever. It just means you're protecting the part of you that feels everything so intensely. And when you find those people, the ones who see you and stay, who don't ask you to be louder, tougher, or easier to understand, that's when your heart feels at peace. That's when your guard starts to lower. That's when you begin to open like a book that's been waiting for someone to read it gently, page by page. Those are the relationships where your true self thrives, where your need for solitude is respected, but your longing for connection is met with depth, where you're not just tolerated, but treasured for who you are, a soul who feels deeply, loves gently, and gives from a place of truth. So if you've ever felt torn between your need for connection and your desire to be alone, know that you're not broken. You're just wired for depth, not surface, for intimacy, not attention. And while the world may not always make space for people like you, the right people will. They'll show up gently. They'll listen fully. They'll meet you in the quiet. And when they do, your softness won't feel like a burden. It'll feel like a gift, the kind the world needs far more of. One of the quiet truths about INFPs is that they often feel a deep ache for connection, even when they struggle to maintain it. It's this strange emotional tug of war. You want to be close, but not too close. You want to be understood, but you don't always know how to explain yourself. You crave emotional intimacy, yet the act of opening up can feel both sacred and terrifying. You want someone to truly see you, but only if they're looking with gentle eyes. Anything less can feel invasive, even if the other person means well. Because you hold your inner world with such reverence, letting someone in isn't casual. For you, vulnerability is not just about sharing stories. It's about handing someone the keys to a private place you've spent years tending to. A place filled with memory, meaning, hopes, fears, and pieces of yourself even you're still trying to understand. This is why shallow conversations or relationships based on convenience don't work for you. They leave you feeling empty, unanchored, like your soul was never invited to the room. And yet, there's something magical that happens when you meet someone who speaks your emotional language. You know instantly. The connection feels natural, unforced. You don't have to explain why silence is sometimes your way of listening. You don't have to apologize for needing time to process or space to be alone. These are the rare friendships and relationships where your inner world is not only safe, but celebrated. Where your quietness is not mistaken for absence. Where your complexity is not treated like a puzzle to solve, but as a depth to explore together. Still, even with these ideal connections, maintaining relationships as an INFP can be a dance. Because while your intentions are full of care and sincerity, your energy can fluctuate. One week, you might feel inspired to reach out, to share, to check in. The next, you may need to pull inward, not out of avoidance, but out of necessity. You're recalibrating. You're sorting through emotions that piled up. You're trying to make sense of something that didn't sit quite right. And often, you do this in silence, not wanting to burden others with your internal storm. This is why communication is so key, even if it's difficult. The people who love you can't always read your silence. They may worry. They may misinterpret your withdrawal. So one of the most loving things you can do, for them and for yourself, is to find gentle ways to explain what you need. A simple, "Hey, I'm processing a lot right now, but I still care about you," can go a long way. You don't have to share every detail, just enough to remind people that your distance isn't a dismissal. It's a form of self-preservation. INFPs also tend to form bonds that are emotionally timeless. Even if years pass, even if you lose contact, certain people remain tucked away in your heart. You revisit conversations in your mind. You remember their laugh. You wonder how they're doing. It's not that you can't let go. It's that when someone matters to you, they leave a lasting impression. You've already written them into your story, and removing them from it feels unnatural. This depth of attachment can be beautiful, but can also make heartbreak or loss particularly difficult. Closure is hard when emotions live in places beyond words. And yet, despite the pain that sometimes comes with loving so deeply, you don't stop. You may retreat. You may build walls for a while. But when the right person comes along, when you feel that resonance, that soul-level alignment, your heart opens again. Slowly, cautiously, but fully. Because deep down, you believe in connection. You believe in the magic of being known. You believe in relationships that don't just make life easier, but make life richer. You're not the type to collect dozens of friends or surround yourself with people just to fill a room. You'd rather have one or two people who truly understand you than 100 who only know the version you show on the surface. And those people, the ones who see you in all your quiet depth, become your chosen family. With them, your guard lowers. Your laughter flows. Your thoughts, no matter how abstract or intense, feel safe to share. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to perform. You can just be. That's the kind of connection your heart is built for. Not constant attention or flashy affection, but soulful presence. Shared silence. Emotional safety. Someone who meets you on the level where your thoughts and feelings begin. And though it might take time to find those people, they are worth waiting for. Because when an INFP finds real connection, it's not just a relationship, it's a homecoming. Chapter 4. Creativity and Calling. The Purpose-Driven Dreamer. If you're an INFP, chances are you've always felt a pull towards something more, something beyond just existing, beyond doing things because you're supposed to. Deep inside you, there's a whisper that never quite goes away. It calls you toward meaning, toward truth, toward something that matters. You're not the kind of person who can settle for a job that only pays the bills or a lifestyle that lacks passion. You need to feel that what you're doing is aligned with who you are, that your work, your voice, your time are contributing to something that reflects your soul. And that's the thing about INFPs. They are deeply purpose-driven. They might not always know exactly what their purpose is, and they may spend years searching for it, but they know when something isn't it. You can feel it in your body when you're doing work that drains you or goes against your values. There's a kind of quiet misery that creeps in, a heaviness that settles in your chest. On the outside, you may still show up, still smile, still do what's expected, but inside, you're shrinking. That inner flame begins to flicker. But when you do find something that feels right, when your work reflects your beliefs, when your effort feels like it contributes to something meaningful, you come alive. Your creativity flows. Your focus sharpens. Time disappears. You feel like yourself. Not the version of you that navigates the outside world politely, but the real you. The one who's been waiting for a place to show up fully. That's the space where INFPs thrive, when purpose and creativity merge, and your inner world finds expression in the outer world. Creativity, for an INFP, isn't just about art. It can be, of course. Many INFPs are gifted writers, musicians, painters, filmmakers, and illustrators. But creativity also shows up in the way you think, the way you solve problems, the way you see connections between ideas that no one else would have noticed. It's in how you speak from the heart, how you write words that make people feel seen, how you create experiences that carry emotional weight. Your creativity isn't loud or performative. It's soulful. It doesn't try to impress. It tries to express. And yet, as powerful as your creativity is, it can also feel fragile at times. There may be days, or even seasons, when you feel disconnected from it. Maybe fear gets in the way. Maybe perfectionism whispers that it's not good enough, so you don't start at all. Maybe life just gets noisy, and your inner voice gets drowned out. This is a common INFP experience, having so many ideas, so many dreams, but struggling to translate them into action. You want everything to feel right, to feel true, before you take the first step. But waiting for perfect clarity can often become a form of quiet self-sabotage. It helps to remember that creativity doesn't need to be epic to be valuable. It doesn't always have to become a masterpiece or a career. Sometimes it's just a quiet practice, a way to stay connected to yourself. Writing a poem no one will ever read. Playing a song alone in your room. Sketching your feelings when you can't find the words. These moments matter. They keep your spirit breathing. They keep your identity grounded when the outside world feels confusing or chaotic. Still, many INFPs do feel called to turn their creativity into their work. And that can feel like both a blessing and a burden. You want your career to reflect your values, to feel aligned with your identity. You want your work to have emotional integrity. But the road to making that happen is rarely simple. It's filled with self-doubt, unexpected detours, and the tension between needing to pay the bills and needing to feel fulfilled. You might jump between jobs or stay in one for too long because it's safe, even though it dulls your spirit. You might feel torn between the urge to create freely and the pressure to be productive. This is where your calling becomes your compass. Not necessarily a job title or a 5-step plan, but a deeper sense of what makes you come alive. What breaks your heart in a way that makes you want to do something about it? What lights you up so completely that you forget to check your phone? What kinds of work make you feel like you're contributing, not just performing? When you start to pay attention to these inner cues, without judgment or urgency, the pieces of your calling begin to emerge. And your path may not look like anyone else's. It probably won't be linear. It might be messy, non-traditional, or slow-burning. That's okay. INFPs aren't wired for rigid systems or cookie-cutter paths. You're a meaning seeker, a storyteller, a quiet visionary. Your journey might involve 1,000 false starts, a dozen reinventions, long pauses, and sudden bursts of clarity. But through it all, that desire for purpose, for authenticity, will keep pulling you forward. It's also worth saying that your purpose isn't always something out there. It's not always a grand mission or a perfect role waiting to be discovered. Sometimes your calling is in how you show up, in the way you listen, in the way you tell the truth through your art, your words, your relationships. You have the ability to infuse meaning into the simplest things. to turn the ordinary into something quietly profound. And that, in itself, is a form of purpose. So if you're still searching, don't rush it. Don't panic. You're not behind. You're unfolding. You're clarifying. You're finding your voice, not just so the world can hear you, but so you can hear yourself. And when that voice becomes steady, when you stop trying to sound like everyone else, that's when your creativity and your calling begin to merge into something powerful. You are here to create, to feel, to offer your perspective, even if it's soft, to build something honest. Whether that becomes a career, a cause, or simply a way of living, it's enough. You're enough. And the more you trust that inner compass, the more your path will begin to reflect who you really are. Don't be afraid to dream big, but don't be afraid to start small either. Let your creativity be messy. Let your purpose evolve. Let all be imperfect, but yours. Because you were never meant to follow someone else's script. You were meant to write your own. One page, one idea, one quietly powerful step at a time. And here's the tender truth most INFPs don't hear enough. Your purpose doesn't have to be proven. It doesn't need to come with awards, applause, or a perfect portfolio. Your creativity doesn't have to be monetized to be meaningful. In a world obsessed with results and recognition, it's easy to forget that some of the most powerful work happens in silence. In journals that no one reads, in stories that never get published, in kindnesses you offer without expecting anything back. That's the INFP way. You pour your heart into what you do, not because the world is watching, but because it's an expression of your truth. Still, there may be this tension inside you, a whisper that says, I want to make something of my life. You may carry ideas that feel too big for your hands, dreams that feel just out of reach. You imagine yourself creating art that heals people, writing books that stir hearts, building projects that reflect your values and touch the world. And then, the weight of it all hits. Where do I begin? What if I fail? What if no one understands what I'm trying to say? That fear can be paralyzing, especially for a personality as reflective as yours. You live so fully in your mind and your heart that the leap into doing can feel terrifying. But here's the thing. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to begin gently, slowly, in your own way. A small poem scribbled in the dark. A design drafted and tucked away. A voice memo recorded just for you. Every act of creativity is a seed. Not all of them will grow, and not all of them are meant to, but some will. And when they do, they'll carry your spirit into the world. What's tricky is that INFPs often measure their progress in emotion, not milestones. You ask, does this feel true? Rather than did I hit the goal? And while that's a beautiful strength, it can also mean you struggle to recognize just how much you've grown. You may dismiss your own efforts because they didn't feel dramatic enough. But healing, growth, expression, these often happen in whispers, not roars. The art you make, the presence you bring, the people you encourage just by being you, these things matter more than you may ever know. And let's talk about resistance, the quiet, internal kind. That voice that shows up just when you're about to create or take a bold step. It says things like, this isn't good enough. You don't know what you're doing. You'll never finish. That voice is loud for INFPs, not because you lack confidence, but because you care so deeply. You want your work to reflect the fullness of what you feel. And when it falls short, as it inevitably will at first, it feels like a betrayal of your inner world. But perfection is not the goal. Expression is. Start messy. Let it be raw. Let it be clumsy. What matters is not how polished it is. What matters is that it's yours. That it came from a place of truth. That you honor the urge inside you instead of silencing it. Every time you do that, you reclaim a piece of your voice. Your calling might change. It might evolve as you do. What feels purposeful in your 20s may shift in your 40s. That doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you're alive and growing. The real calling is not a destination. It's the process of becoming. It's the lifelong practice of listening inward and letting what you find guide your outward life. And if you ever feel like you're the only one who dreams the way you do, you're not. There are other quiet creators out there, other gentle souls writing songs at midnight, building businesses that reflect their values, painting emotions they can't speak aloud, choosing work that honors their sensitivity. You may not see them often. They may not be loud, but they're out there, just like you. So if you're still waiting to figure it all out, still sitting with blank pages and half-formed dreams, take heart. You're not lost. You're becoming. Keep following what feels warm, what stirs your curiosity, what brings you peace. Let your creative voice guide you, even when it trembles. And trust that your purpose, whatever shape it takes, will unfold not through force, but through honesty. Chapter 5. Struggles and Strengths. Embracing the INFP Journey. Let's be honest. Being an INFP can sometimes feel like you're walking through life barefoot while everyone else is wearing boots. You feel everything, and you feel it deeply. There's no emotional armor to buffer you from the noise and pressure of the world. The same heart that lets you write beautiful poetry or see the best in people also makes you vulnerable to emotional exhaustion, self-doubt, and quiet griefs that no one else even notices. And yet, despite it all, you continue to love, to dream, to care, to try. That's strength, even if it doesn't always look like the kind the world tends to celebrate. One of the biggest struggles many INFPs face is the feeling of being misunderstood. It can start early, maybe in childhood, maybe later, but at some point, you realize that the way you process life is different. While others chase status, competition, or social validation, you're over here wondering what it all means. You're asking questions no one seems to be thinking about. Why am I here? What really matters? Is this job in alignment with who I am? Your depth is a gift, but can be isolating. It's easy to feel like you're too quiet, too intense, too idealistic, too much, or not enough in all the ways the world measures success. This can lead to a kind of emotional fatigue. You want to participate in life, but not at the cost of your integrity. You want to make a difference, but you're constantly aware of how broken the systems are. You want to be seen, but not in a way that compromises your authenticity. So you often end up pulling back, not out of laziness or fear, but because you're trying to find your own way. The conventional paths don't fit, and trying to force yourself into them only leaves you feeling disconnected, depleted, or like a stranger to yourself. Then there's the perfectionism, not the obvious kind, where everything has to be neat and tidy, but the emotional kind. You want things to feel right. You want your work, your relationships, your choices to align with your values. And when they don't, it creates inner friction that's hard to shake off. You may delay starting projects because you're waiting for the perfect idea, the perfect energy, the perfect version of yourself. But here's the thing, perfection is a myth, and chasing it can be one of the biggest blocks to your creativity and your peace. What matters is honesty, not flawlessness. What matters is showing up as you are, not as you think you should be. INFPs also tend to carry a unique kind of emotional memory. You remember how someone made you feel. Not just the moment, but the atmosphere, the unspoken energy, the nuance. This gives you incredible emotional intelligence, but it also makes it hard to move on from pain. You can forgive, but forgetting? That's not so easy. You might find yourself revisiting conversations from years ago, not to dwell, but because you're still trying to understand, still trying to process, still trying to find the meaning or closure that never came. And because you internalize so much, your inner critic can be brutal. It doesn't yell, it whispers. You're not doing enough. You're falling behind. You should have handled that better. You're too sensitive for this world. These voices are hard to ignore, especially when they echo louder than external praise. And when you're already so introspective, it's easy to spiral, to get stuck in your head, questioning your worth, your choices, your path. But here's what's equally true, and just as important to remember. You are incredibly resilient. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It's the source of your empathy, your creativity, your insight. You feel things deeply, but you also love deeply. You notice suffering, but you also see beauty in places others overlook. You hold space for people's pain in ways that can be healing just by your presence alone. You don't need to fix everything. Sometimes, just the way you listen, the way you care, the way you stay. That's the gift. You are also courageous in quiet ways. It takes guts to walk your own path when the world is pulling you in 1,000 other directions. It takes strength to say, no, this doesn't align with who I am, even if it costs you approval, comfort, or familiarity. It takes deep-rooted integrity to keep believing in goodness when so much around you seems transactional, or superficial. You might not always feel strong, but the way you stay soft in a hard world, that's not weakness. That's endurance. That's grit. And here's something else you need to hear. Your presence makes a difference, even when it doesn't feel like it. You might not be the loudest voice in the room. You might not be the one getting credit or attention. But the way you see people, the way you reflect beauty back to them, the way you quietly challenge them to go deeper, that matters. You create ripple effects that you may never witness, but they're real. Your very way of being offers people permission to slow down, to be real, to feel again. The INFP journey isn't easy. It's full of contradictions, quiet battles, and long inner seasons that others may never see. But it's also full of beauty, not just the kind you create, but the kind you are. You are the poet who reminds people of truth, the dreamer who envisions a better world, the listener who helps people hear themselves, the gentle soul who makes this noisy world just a little softer, a little more honest, a little more human. So yes, you will struggle. You will question yourself. You will ache for clarity, for connection, for something real. But don't let those struggles make you shrink. Let them refine you. Let them teach you how to show up with both softness and strength. And let them remind you, again and again, that your depth is not a liability. It's a light. You're not here to be like everyone else. You're here to be you, fully, bravely, quietly, truthfully. And in doing so, you give others the courage to do the same. What people often don't realize about INFPs is how much of their strength lives beneath the surface. You may not be the loudest person in the room, and you may not seek the spotlight, but your inner world is rich with wisdom that comes from observation, contemplation, and deep emotional honesty. The kind of strength isn't always flashy. It doesn't always show up in boardrooms or on stages, but it shows up when someone is crying and doesn't know why, and you sit with them. It shows up when you write a paragraph that captures a truth someone else could never put into words. It shows up when you speak softly, but your words stay with someone for days. There's a quiet confidence in the way INFPs move through life. Not because you think you have all the answers, but because you feel what's right and what's wrong, and you don't easily betray that feeling. You may bend at times. You may doubt yourself, but your values are your roots. They hold you steady even when the wind of uncertainty blows hard. And when you honor those values, even in small, everyday choices, that's where your real power lives. Still, it's easy to feel discouraged, especially when you look around and it seems like everyone else has a blueprint for success, while you're still trying to make sense of what success even means. The world praises ambition and efficiency, and you're over here wondering, but is it meaningful? Does it feel right? You don't want to chase success just for the sake of it. You want a life that feels purposeful, aligned, full of moments that resonate with your soul. And because of that, you may take longer to reach certain milestones. You may wander. You may start things and not finish them. You may change your mind halfway through a career path because something no longer feels true. But this isn't failure. It's part of your design. You're not lost. You're exploring. You're refining. You're moving through life with emotional intelligence as your compass. And that's not a weakness. It's rare wisdom. That doesn't mean you won't get tired. There will be days when the weight of your emotions feels too heavy to carry. Days when you feel invisible in a world that favors noise over nuance. Days when you wonder if your dreams are too strange, too soft, too idealistic to ever find a home in the real world. And it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to rest, to cry, to pull back and regroup. What matters is that you don't let those moments convince you that you're not meant for this world. Because you are. The truth is, the world needs people like you more than ever. People who slow down. People who feel deeply. People who create not for approval, but from love. People who still believe in the quiet power of kindness and the magic of meaning. You are the mirror that helps others see their own humanity. You are the light that flickers in a dark corner, soft but steady. You are the bridge between emotion and expression, between longing and understanding. And as you continue this journey, through all the questions, setbacks, breakthroughs, and quiet joys, remember that your path doesn't need to look like anyone else's. It only needs to feel true to you. Because your truth, your voice, your way of seeing the world, it matters. It may not be the loudest. It may not always be understood, but it is real. And that realness, that's what makes you unforgettable. So honor your struggles. Don't hide them. They've shaped your insight. They've deepened your compassion. They've made you the kind of person who can sit with someone in their pain and not flinch. But also honor your strengths. Not just your talents, but your spirit. The fact that you keep showing up with an open heart in a world that so often asks you to close it, that's extraordinary. You're not weak for feeling deeply. You are not broken because you move differently. You are not less because your success comes in soul-sized portions rather than traditional achievements. You are whole, tender and tough, questioning and clear, imaginative and grounded, all at the same time. And that's the real power of the INFP. To live from within, to love without reason, to create with conviction, and to quietly change the world. Not by becoming someone else, but by finally, fully becoming yourself.